So this talk is about more business value of the headless and the decoupled approach for content management in general, and it's not trying to be technical. Before going into this, I will just say a few words about me. I won't be too long, but I'm a New Yorker, but you might have noticed my accent is not so much from New York. I'm French. Moved to New York 10 years ago, live in Sunnyside, Queens. That is more or less my view of New York, actually, these days with stormy weather. I'm working as a senior vice president at a company called Ibexa. We are a software company that I'm pretty sure nobody knows yet here. But it's somehow an old company, and we've been in the content management space for quite a long time. We just recently rebranded, but we in the past were on a product called Easy Platform, and our product is still called Easy Platform. And before Easy Platform, the product was called Easy Publish in the 2000, and we started as an open source content management systems based on PHP, Easy Publish. We moved to Symfony full stack in 2015 or something like this with Easy Platform, and we recently rebranded and building a more, I would say, a slightly different product around digital experience platform, but still using the core content management piece that we've been doing for years. Myself, I've been, before working on strategy, I've been leading this product, Easy Platform and Easy Publish. Also been chief product at Nuxio, content platform, and just making it a little bit personal, even if it's difficult through screens. I'm a confined New Yorker. I'm an avid runner. I run slower and slower now because I'm getting weight with the confinement, but I love to run. I love wine. It's a good balance to find, and I love to travel. And I'm somehow very sad about this situation, but I still try to keep things positive. So a big warning for the people who are here. This is not a developer talk. This is the business track, I think, or maybe CXO, I'm not sure. I'm not a developer anymore. I've been long ago, but 25 years ago, actually. So then I moved to architecture. So there's a touch on architecture, but it's more for an audience which is more on the business functional side here that I want to talk. And I'm assuming, and that's where I would have loved some polls, I'm assuming people in the audience are more, maybe are really aware about decoupled and headless. So maybe they are more technical than what this talk is about, but let's see. Feel free to jump in again. Say, Mark, you want to comment or ask a question during the flow, please do it, because I think questions are better in the flow more than at the end. As an example, yeah.
Okay, I will do.
Yeah. As an example, I will try to pronunciate only one time GraphQL, and that's now. I just did it, and I will not say it one more time. That's I try to focus on the business value. I try to, and these days, I try to speak a lot with our partners, customers, and so on about technology and trying to relate to what they try to achieve going digital and developing their digital platforms. So there's many different ways you can build digital experiences, and we know that it's first and foremost made of content, and that's why content management is so important. Any digital experience is first and foremost made of content. We will speak a lot of content management technology without going into the details of the implementation, but more the terms. It's key for digital experiences. And there are many ways to build digital experiences. And at the end of the day, every of our customers, they end up building their own digital platform. We, Ibexa, or others like Acquia, Sitecore, Adobe, whatever, they call themselves sometimes digital experience platform. We do the same in my company. I will not speak about our product. I think the only platform that really matters is not our platform. It's the one the customer is building. The customer is building its digital platform, and it will operate its digital business on this platform. And it's very important. When I speak with customers on the market and with partners, what I see is that there's a big mismatch, actually. On one end, there's the business side, the functional marketing side, functional roles like CMO, which very often are the one buying our technology. There's been a lot of buzz on headless, and they very often they see headless as a promise that it will solve one of their most important concerns, which is creating content, managing this content, being able to use it everywhere. We've been using this forever, create once, publish everywhere. They see this promise, but they very often don't see the technical side of it and what it really means for their operation. They tend to see it as a miracle cure to the old traditional pain of content management, and obviously it's not. And on the other side, on the partner side or on the vendor side, there's a totally different approach where they see headless as something very technical, which is a lot about APIs, a lot about mashing up services together. And at the end, they don't speak the same language, and I try to align this a lot, trying to give some sense of understanding for the business of what really means decoupled and headless, and how it resonates with their concerns, which are maybe more business or more functional. So the best way I've found over the years to speak about that to a business person or to a non-digital savvy person is to make an analogy with the physical world. I think analogy often work in technology, and I always go with this analogy about something which is very physical, which is a brick and mortar business. Every business can be somehow compared to building a house or building something, but building a house is very easy to do. And so when we create businesses, when our customers are creating businesses, they are building houses. And the house they build, sometimes they are a startup, and the house they build, sometimes they never built a house, and there will be a thunderstorm like yesterday, and the house will collapse, and they will learn from this, and they will create a new house, rebuild it stronger, and so on. When they are established company, they will, of course, have employees working in the house, customers coming to the house, and you'd better hope they got the foundation right, and they probably did, because they did this for many years, and they are more solid, and the house may not collapse, but you never know. My example that I take sometimes, because I also like coffee, is let's imagine we are launching a coffee business, a specialty coffee purveyor, like there are many now, and it's been a big trend. Seattle, and think about your T-shirt now. So the way you could build your coffee business, like your specialty coffee business, is definitely you want to produce your coffee yourself. You want to roast, of course. You want fresh beans, source beans somewhere, and you want to roast the beans and create good coffee. And you want to sell this coffee, and you could put everything under the same roof in the same house. You would have the front of the house with the baristas and the customer-facing part of the business, and you would have the back office, which would be the roasting facility, and also where you stock your beans and your coffee and all the rest. And then you would have the management, which would sit here, and that would be very simple. And you could create this very easily. It's not very complicated. It's a very simple business model, and you can go with that and maybe scale vertically. But what you can do at some point very easily is start to think about decoupling. As you grow your business and it's successful, probably you will say, I will roast somewhere where maybe the rents are cheaper. I can put a bigger machine. I need a bigger roasting machine, and I will basically decouple the front of the house from the roasting facility. And of course, I will need to also have my management or somewhere, maybe in one of the two, or maybe just on an office space in WeWork. But basically, physically, you can easily see that if you're successful in your business, you will decouple your operation. You will place it at different place physically, and that's something that can really give you a lot of value. It can give you a lot of value because it can let you scale the business in a very nice way, in a very lean and agile way. You can add different front of the house or open many locations, without this being really an issue for you, because you are designed to operate like this. You're not anymore designed to operate with the roasting facility that is coupled to your front of the house and the management team, which is only at the front of the house of your only one single monolithic house. So decoupling your physical business, your physical operation, gives you a lot of things that allows you to scale maybe the front of the house or maybe the roasting facility, depending how your business is going. So very clearly, that's quite a ton of value. The question is, what's the value for the business to do this? Of course, it's what I mentioned, agility. You're way more able to, if you're successful with your beans, but front of the house is not your thing, and you will start to provide to resellers, you can grow the roasting side of the business without really growing the customer-facing side. And vice versa, maybe roasting is not your thing, and you will source already roasted coffee, and you will actually scale your front of the house. A lot of agility, a lot of flexibility, a lot of scalability, and a lot of extensibility. It's a little bit jargon, but that's actually the reality. If you think your operation like this, you're probably more likely to grow and to grow well. It doesn't come for free, because it's also coming with, as you can see in the very simplistic schema that I draw. I didn't try to make some art here. It's also bringing complexity, because you have different locations to manage. You have different leads. You need to govern like the flow of people and products between the different places. You need to maintain all this in good working conditions. So it's bringing actually a lot of complexity, a lot of overhead as well. But it's for the benefit of the flexibility and the agility. And it's a simple example, but when you relate to decoupling this way, I think every business-minded people gets it. They are interested to know this. If you think about like not coffee roasting, because this is a little bit of a boutique thing, but if you think of something more industrial about car making, in the same way, the business leader, they want to know how cars are produced. How you develop, how you build your product is very important to them. As a matter of fact, whether it's Ford at the beginning of the 20th century, or whether it's Toyota after the Second World War when they came with the lean and agile manufacturing, they made a difference on their market because they care for the way they were building their operations. They care for the way their operation was architected. And now that we are in 2020, that it's all about digital transformation, I think it's very important for business leadership, CEOs, CMOs, and so on, to also understand how you build your digital operation. So you cannot just say like headless, decoupled, well, this is technical things that belong to the digital team, and I ignore this. You need to really start to create some understanding and relate to the things that are at stake, even if they are not physical. They are real things, they are real operations. There are a lot of costs and opportunities for business efficiency. So you need to understand. Starting with the physical analogy usually help understand a little bit what's at stake when you start to speak about headless, when you start to speak about software architecture, when you start to speak about service-oriented architecture, and so on. So moving on with this, back to software, let's try to speak a little bit about how we can build digital platforms to create digital experiences. That's what content management is all about, actually. What's at stake? What's at risk? Very simplified view of the topic of the conference, decoupling content management, is all about decoupling content creation and content delivery. In reality, it's much more than that, what's at stake, and it's really not as simple, I guess you all know. First of all, content management, there's so much more than content management, and that's probably now why we speak more about digital experience platform. So, of course, decoupling the delivery of content is very important, but how about how you manage the engagement with the customer, how you manage the transactions? Decoupling e-commerce is equally important or equally an option on the table. If you go for an e-commerce project or an e-business project, not necessarily selling, but having a transactional relation with your customer online, how will you build this? Will you decouple some different functional modules of your digital platform, or will you try to go for another option? So decoupling when you create your digital platform is more than decoupling content creation and content delivery. It can take many forms, many shapes, many facets. There's many things to explore. It's a little bit simplified, but it's a good start. When I look at the landscape now and the options that are on the table for customers and organizations, enterprises, governmental organizations as well, there's different options for them to build their digital platform. And I tend to see now really three families, two which are old. On the top, you have the old DXP, very often coming from the CMS world, traditional CMS world, sometimes coming from the portal world, but that is not so different than the CMS world. And they all have their differences. They all are using different stacks. But in general, they have this common thing that except, of course, if you take Drupal as a community project on this slide, the other names that are there, they are commercial vendors, and they all tend to be very hungry, and they all tend to try to solve all the problem of the digital space. They want to get it all. They are in the direction of building an all-in-one, honestly, and their approach is to solve all the problems for the customer. You have the same approach from vendors that are coming from the e-commerce world, because more and more the e-commerce world is important. Like e-commerce is increasingly involved in digital projects, and e-commerce players go beyond e-commerce and they start to build content management capabilities. They start to build marketing automation capabilities and so on. And they also have this approach of taking the whole approach, trying to solve the whole problem space. And then you have this new, very interesting approach for companies to build their digital platform, which I would call more the stack approach, which is actually about combining solutions which don't necessarily want to do everything. On this, I put some vendors and some like tech open source projects. So, but of course, if you think about headless CMS vendors like Contentful or Prismic, it's interesting that those vendors, they don't try to do everything. They try to do one focused thing really well. And the approach is to delegate, or let's say not to take the mission of creating the whole platform, but to delegate this to the customer. It becomes the customer job to assemble this into one platform. And it's what we are exploring in this talk, how we can build a digital platform using some headless and decoupled concepts from different solutions, and what it means for the business in terms of benefits and also risk. So moving on, how does that look like for enterprises or organizations when they are at the early stage and they are researching solutions? They didn't commit yet to a solution. They are not in the building. They are more in the researching their solution and their path to building their digital platform, their ultimate digital platform. And that's where we are lucky to be often invited and to, together with our partners who are consulted, and what we see very often, or at least what I see, look very much like this. I don't know if anybody sees this. That's what I would do in a real conference. I would try to have people telling me what this is. Does anybody know what this is? I will see later on the chat, but this is the Saint-Barthélemy massacres in France in 1572. That's the French Wars of Religion. And what we see at the early phases of the project now is very ugly. Very often we see a lot of politics from vendors, which, I mean, I don't want to, again, to speak about my company. We try to not do too much politics, but there's always a politics side of it, like when you are in this early stage of trying to sell a solution. So a lot of politics and a lot of promises, and some people very opinionated with different approach. And it's very simplistic, but you can really very often see that you have the one who are belonging to the cult of the monolith. And this cult is an old one. It's been there forever. And it's basically one of the big promise of this cult is that the monolith will do everything. Will do everything you can imagine. You don't even know now, but it will be there because the monolith knows it all. On the profile of those solutions, rarely they are open or rarely they are open source. often a strong lock-in, hard to get in, quite expensive, heavy, complex, doesn't look promising, but actually sometimes it works. The champions or the typical buyers, the business consultancy firm, the large SI who are really like very often really tied to relations with vendors, the C level, CIO, CFO, CEO, and COO, they tend to buy a lot because the monolith learn how to speak business really well, actually. So that's one side. And the other side of the cult is more recently, like the one going for this new stack approach that I mentioned, made of best of breeds, relating more to a service-based architecture, which comes with many promises as well, actually. The promise that actually being service-based, you will also be able to do everything. So it's fantastic because both religions, they can do everything, but actually that's common in technology and in software. We all know that you can do anything with software. It's not really about if you can, but how can you do it? So one of the strong promises is that it's agile and fast. Clearly, on the paper it is. It's also very often the underlying promise is that it's very cost efficient, but this needs some very deep investigation, actually, because it's a little bit of a shortcut to think there's no big license fee for the monolith, but you might have a lot of fees, or like just let's say you combine a Contentful, another headless e-commerce vendor, a couple of API management solutions, you will quickly actually build a cost which is really not neglectable either. So this is to be checked how much it's cost efficient, but the promise comes with the cult, actually. And it can evolve quickly. And this, by no doubt, from having an architecture background, of course, this is the kind of software architecture which is made to be capable of evolving quickly, which is why it's so relevant in these days where speed is becoming more important than cost, which is good. And typically the champions of this cult are the CTO, the lead developer, the software architects, or it could be more the digital agencies, which are more on the modern side of them, not the large SI, but the digital agency would try to have a modern twist to what they propose. And that's great. So what's the reality check with those two cults? Like, is really this last proposal, this last option, the service-based approach, really the best because it looks so promising? Or is Headless and Decoupled the solution to your digital project? Well, it's not obvious at all, because what you see is that invariably digital projects keep failing, and that's just our reality. Nobody can ignore this. Some projects succeed, but the majority of the digital projects are failing. They are clearly not. It's clearly not a walk in the park. When I say failing, is looking at cost side and project schedule, time and calendar look. Sometimes they succeed and they end up okay, but if you look at from a business perspective, take some elevation and look at what was projected on the cost and the timing table, clearly there's a huge rate of failure. Whether you're on the monolith or you are really embracing a service-oriented approach, it's the same, actually. And actually, I would even think service-oriented and decoupled approach are not new at all. Remember, 20 years ago, I was working on it was not really yet content management. I was more on the other side of the firewall and working on internal system. But we got this huge trend for Corba, for ORBs, and very distributed architecture that came with very heavy technology that was very hard to apprehend. This led to some of the biggest fail of the IT industry, honestly. Like huge money wasted, just like huge money was wasted on the SAP monolith by other customers. So clearly, headless, decoupled, or microservices or monolith, those are not really the reasons for the success or the failure on the business side. The reason is somewhere else. And why? Why? Well, just because I will start to quote someone that I will quote a couple of times. This is from Sam Brown. I don't know if anybody knows Sam Brown. He's a software architect. He has a good, cool blog, codingthearchitecture.com. And he once said something like, if we say that the monolith is a big ball of mud, actually microservices are just turning into a distributed big ball of mud. And that's what this guy, Alvaro Sanchez, illustrated in a, I mean, I don't know if it's hard, but at least it's a little bit funny.
Different translation of mud, but okay.
Exactly. So yeah, like, and that's so true. The problem is actually not whether you go one way or the other. I think the problem is more a problem between cult versus reality. Some are using the monolith term as a very loaded negative term, and now headless is a very positive term. It comes with a promise, and the last thing you want to do, I think, is to buy in to the promise without really knowing what it is. And whether it's one side or the other, it's clear that to me, you need to be in the real. You don't need to be in the belief. And why projects are failing is somewhere else. So here I could ask, like, where? And I don't have the poll, but the answer is actually very straightforward. It's very easy to find. It's complexity. What we deal with is complex. What we do is complex. Some of the websites we do are more complex than others. Some people tend to think making a website is simple. It's not. Even the simplest of the website come with some complexity. And building a digital platform for an organization is very complex. And keep in mind, we've been building websites only for a few decades when we've been building houses for centuries. So that's also why it's complex and new, adding to the complexity. So let's look at the complexity a little bit more in detail. Complexity, there's different kind of complexity when you look at actually your digital initiatives, and you need to be aware of those. And I will take the approach of going monolith. How will be my complexity? What is the complexity I need to manage? First, there's something I call the essential complexity. This is the complexity of the problem you want to solve. You are trying to solve a specific problem, and here I agree that if you're just trying to make an informational website for an association, it might be not that complex. It still has some complexity, but here it's not as complex as if you're making a B2B marketplace to sell online some stuff. Will be transactional, will be more complex, but in any case, there's essential complexity to what you try to achieve. It's the business problem you solve. There's technology complexity, and I have a typo on this slide, because building comes with complexity. We all know that. Complexity of the technology we use, complexity of the technical stack, the web servers, the web services, the public cloud we use. All this is getting complex. Even if we are familiar with it, it has its amount of complexity. Then there's something, the pink one, which is very big, the accidental complexity. The best example of this is what we are living now, is the pandemic. It's actually something absolutely accidental, not planned for, but you need to deal with. But it's happening all the time. You don't need a pandemic to have a lot of accidental complexity. A teammate leaving a team because he found a better job somewhere and is leaving without proper knowledge transfer. This is accidental complexity that can bring a lot of complexity to your project. So that's accidental complexity. And if you go for the monolith approach, you have something that I call here the unnecessary complexity, which is very annoying. You will end up dealing with a lot of features, a lot of capabilities that actually you don't need. And you will struggle to focus on your real business problem because the monolith vendor will come all the time with additional capabilities that you could do this, you could do that, you could do, like Microsoft is extremely good at this. When you sign for Office 365 for emailing, then you are into it and they will try to sell you the whole thing. So complexity need to be analyzed and need to be understood. When you go with a service-based architecture, it's very similar. Essential complexities there, technology complexities there, accidental complexities there. The great thing about it, unnecessary complexity is not there, because usually the value of service-based architecture is that you will focus on what you really need to solve your problem, and you will not carry a lot of features that are useless. But you will create decoupling complexity, and that's one of the things people really tend to forget. You are introducing a lot of complexity when you decouple. If I get back to my brick and mortar example, and you start to split your operation in a lot of in a lot of places, locations across New York City. Well, you are bringing a lot of complexity in terms of logistic. It's the same in software. When you will try to connect many services, whether they are microservices or bigger services, no matter what, it's complexity that you bring. Anybody who tries to integrate business system together know that integration has a cost, actually. So, I'm sincerely hoping that the decoupling complexity can be smaller than the unnecessary complexity. I find it more healthy, but it's not so simple. Let's look a little bit at the driver and get back to Simon Brown and another quote from him. If you can't build a well-structured monolith, what makes you think the microservices are the answer? So that's just all about that, because complexity will still be there, and complexity will follow drivers which are very similar. If I'm on the monolith, the all-in-one, actually, that's the first thing people understood. The bigger the scope the monolith try to deliver, the bigger the complexity. You will have a lot of things actually you will not use, which adds up. And if your monolith is SAP, actually, I think it's much bigger than if your monolith is maybe just Sitecore. They are both monolith approach, but Sitecore doesn't want to be ERP. So it's a little bit a simplification, but the scope is, of course, increasing complexity. So that's what led us to service-oriented architecture. The scope is increasing complexity. Let's cut the scope in small pieces, and then we are done because we solve complexity issue. Well, we solve it at the component level, but we don't. We should not forget the cost of decoupling, because decoupling on the right side is increasing exponentially the complexity as well. Mark, you wanted to jump in?
Chime in the chat. One is from Ralph. Would it be reasonable to add the complexity of content there as well, or is it basically implied in the other complexity fields?
I think complexity of the content is in the what I call the essential, the domain. Like if you have an information architecture which is very complex because your business domain is very complex, that will bring complexity. When you start to deep down try to build content that will be delivered on many touch points, many channels, this is part of your essential complexity. This is part of your domain, the problem you want to solve. So to me, it was in this like first layer, but we could split this layer in different things, and there could be the content complexity. I totally agree.
Piyush, and I'm sorry if I butchered that name. Complexity part of technology complexity only? Isn't decoupling complexity part of
it? Could. I agree that you can. It's interesting because you can definitely you can look at it this way. Absolutely, depending on the stack you choose and you're turning this, but. It is, but it's maybe because the focus of this conference and this talk is about decoupling and basically isolating this. But probably the technology complexity can be split in many ways. Like, and don't get me starting with hosting. Like typically, we've been moving a lot to the cloud lately. All of us, like moving to SaaS and also platform as a service approach. There's a lot of we could focus on different domain in the technology complexity and then try to look into this. But then I would agree. It could be also just if we want the big picture, it could be seen as part of the technology complexity.
That's all the questions are. So, oh wait, nope. Well, sorry, right then. Should there be a consideration of change management complexity as content management, site management, architecture management? They're very different.
Big time. Actually, that's a little bit where I'm going after, even if I didn't really put it using change management word, but I will get there in a couple of slides, actually. Definitely. So yeah, I'll touch on this in 5 minutes, basically. But before going to change, and transformation, the first thing that I somehow want to share, or to hopefully people can take away, is that I think it's very important to be, here I use the word agnostic as opposed to cult, or it's very important to be agnostic in the sense of being pragmatic and living in the real. And for for this reason, because that's the only way you can reduce complexity. When you believe in something, when you believe things should be done in one way and you don't really know why, but you just buy in, you drink the Kool-Aid and you go full throttle on monolith or full throttle on solution A or B, whether it's if you're just believing without knowing and without experiencing yourself, you don't know. The best way to reduce complexity is to be very pragmatic and to try to understand really the complexity of what you try to do, the complexity of the technology, and never just believe, just always doubt of everything. That I think it's actually very important. That's maybe one of the first takeaway I try to share, because there's too much of those failures, which for a big share of them, they lie into like high-level architecture choice that have been made based on belief and on like ignorance, actually. So that doesn't really solve yet the question, and that's where we will get more to the change management and transformation. And so the big next thing for the business side of the organization is to understand what we call very often digital maturity, which is about change. It's to understand where you are as an organization in terms of maturity to build a digital platform or to operate a digital platform. There are many models, and the consulting firms are really good at making their own models. I'm pretty sure Accenture, Deloitte, and they all have their digital maturity model, but probably all lie on the same concept. But it's actually true. That's one of the key. You will need to take your organization for some serious change if you want to succeed. I like the fact that, for instance, Mark Granan at Forrester was introducing this. He was suggesting that for headless technology, we could put a sticker, if it was a physical product still, put a sticker like a caution, H caution headless for that's for users who know what headless is, primarily for developers, not designed for non-technical practitioners. Just because so many organizations try to jump on the headless thing without knowing that actually they will need to know how to use APIs and how to build something from services. So I just like this. I think it's a little bit of a joke, but it's very important, and it's important for us to make people aware about that. Headless comes with some expectation in your organization in terms of digital maturity.
I say I know that in my last job we moved our website, monolith to headless, and the content creators, content managers could not figure out why the site was not updating until I sat down with them and explained, this is headless, it takes a bit to process, so yeah, I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, and starting, I didn't dive in the specific of content management, but just starting with the preview, they go headless, and then how can I preview my content?
Yeah.
Well, when you're headless and you didn't took care of those actually coupling which are necessary, because you need to couple at some point some specific services. The preview is nobody can create content without being able to preview content, actually. So it's very important that you can preview your content in different contexts, and this doesn't come for free as a miracle once you purchase Contentful. You will need some way to create this preview. So I'm a little bit of a visual guy. I don't know. I'm not really good at drawing, but I try to make like curves and to signify. So it's very simple. And now we talk more about really what is the business value of going headless. And what's interesting on this one is just that it says very clearly, headless can create value increasingly as you grow and you change and you make your organization digital ready. Digital maturity is increasing the value of headless. And what this diagram says as well is that if you are not ready, don't go yet. Like if you are really not ready to go headless, don't jump on the trend because it has a lot of promises. Just get ready for it. Get your organization ready, build a digital team. The old paradigm of content management is that it was almost sold as a out-of-the-box solution, so used by functional people without development. And of course, this never came through, but some organizations are still expecting this, like, as you say, they will buy a headless solution and they will be done. No, not at all. So back to Mark Brennan Forrester in the same blog post, he had, well, they have a much more expensive one where they can do a survey and a research on your digital maturity, but he was also putting a small 5-question tests to know where you are in terms of digital maturity. And those questions, they are about, first, are you recruiting and developing talents in your digital team? Like, do you have the talents, the skill, the people? That's very important. It's also about culture, by the way. Do you have the strategy to use a broad set of channels and touch points? Because actually, if it's not in your strategy, maybe it's not a good idea to go there. Do you have a content strategy that is revolving around reusing content, creating ones, delivering everywhere? If you didn't yet buy to this promise as well, maybe actually Headless is, maybe you're not really mature for this. Do you build something which will require us to be contextualized to your customer or personalized? Or the latest trend is to speak about user journeys. So will you have to adapt to the user journey of the customer? If so, you are like, that counts as a plus. And finally, are you going for an API first, or at least are you API capable in your IT/digital team? And whether how much you rank on this will tell you if you are actually ready to go headless. It's suggesting that if you have 4 or 5 out of this, you are maybe ready. If not, you should reconsider. Well, I think that's simplistic. I think actually the answer is way more progressive. I think the best advice I can give is to never go like full decoupled immediately. I think you need very often to combine, by the way, because there are also domains where you will not want to go too granular. You will combine headless and traditional web content management, for instance. Why not? Drupal, there's a lot of Drupal in this conference, is capable of that. Our solution is also pushing a lot this direction where you can have both, and depending on the initiative and the maturity of the different teams involved, you can go for one or the other. Go progressively, decouple piece by piece, evaluate the result, iterate, learn, and repeat. So that's the approach. Go progressively and not make this like a 3-year plan, but more a 1 month plan or 3 months plan. So I come with 4 suggestions, and we are reaching a little bit the end. So it seems like I'm online. It's very important to focus on the essential, the business problem you solve, and to try to minimize this. That's the core. You need to try to isolate a very strong core, and that's where you need to play about trying to decoupling the big part of this core. This will reduce a lot of complexity. Building modular, but at the right level of granularity. So you will need to think about the domain, and domain by domain, it's not always the same level of granularity. Sometimes microservices might make sense. Sometimes actually much bigger granularity makes sense. Like the old traditional web content management approach might totally make sense if you are not looking at addressing many channels. If you are working with one single team that is in charge of both the delivery channel and the creation channel, well, it's still a very valid option. So look at this. Where is the granularity? What is the granularity that might best fit the business problem you want to solve? Never forget extensibility. You will always have to extend what you did one day. So maintainability is very important for that, extensions points and so on. And finally, keep an open mind for different approaches and models. Never do a 100% choice in one direction. Again, headless or traditional. Again, if we speak about the other domain like hosting, on-prem versus SaaS versus PaaS, you should not necessarily make one choice. You can combine and get a hybrid platform. And I'm getting back to the last time I will quote Simon Brown. I like this one that says that basically the best is a little bit in the compromise. I like to think like this a lot. Monolithic architecture or service-based architecture. There's probably something in between with components, whether they are services or a set of services. There's probably something that will best solve your problem, which is actually a balancing act. So you will have to do a balancing act based on real-time learning. That's how I approach the architecture. There's just a few minutes that I want to keep for question. I don't want to speak too much about us. Just I want to say Ibexa, my employer, and that's also, I'm doing this on my work time. So we are living at basically the intersection of all those approaches. We are a DXP, but we want to be a very lean and compact DXP based on Symfony framework. And we certainly don't try to solve it all. We focus on providing something that can equally be used very decoupled around basically 4 modules: content, website, personalization, and e-commerce. And you can maybe just use our content engine and use Gatsby on the front end, works perfectly fine, or use our website module and use another content provider on the back end and plug this with APIs. It works as well. But that's a little bit where we live, and that's a little bit the belief we have in terms of product strategy. But again, that was just to say a little word of what I believe, but also what my company believe in terms of architecture. I think just 3 minutes left, if I'm not wrong. So I just want to thank you for the few questions. And if there's any other questions, I'm really happy to jump and chat.